Welcome to the Tilted Halo, the place for women of faith and leadership who know that we're not perfect, yet boldly lead anyway. Whether you serve in ministry, business, or life, this show is here to encourage you, remind you that you're not alone, and help you lead with confidence, gratitude, and God's grace. Now, let's get started. Welcome to another episode of The Tilted Halo. And yes, I am Pastor Kathleen Panning, your host, and I am delighted to welcome as my guest today Dawn L. Evans. She is the founder of the SQ Decision System and the SQ Decision Institute, where behavioral science meets spiritual intelligence in leadership. After 17 years in health technology operations, she built a methodology that measures something most leaders are never taught to see: the gap between what the mind decides and what the body is actually running on. She calls it leadership coherence. Her work centers on the most fragile moment in any leader's journey, the transition into a new role, when pressure is highest and clarity is scarcest. Through diagnostics, live sessions, and measurement, Dawn helps newly promoted leaders restore perception before they make decisions that define them. Dawn holds a Woman in Leadership certification from Cornell University, is an alumna of the Dallas Mavericks MBA cohort, and has earned high-level certifications in technology and project management. She is the founder of The Builder's Edit, a publication for purpose-driven leaders, and writes at the intersection of faith, science, and governance. Let me say the right thing there. A woman of faith, Dawn believes stillness and discernment are not soft skills. They are cognitive infrastructure for leaders who intend to build something that lasts. And to be open and honest, Dawn and I have met through a group called Lead Hership Global. And so I welcome Dawn to the Tilted Halo.
Thank you, Kathleen, so much for having me. You're absolutely right. We met through Leadership Global. I've heard many of the statements and contributions that you've made while in that setting, and I am just honored to be here, a part of the Tilted Halo today.
Well, thank you so very, very much. And I'm just excited to hear more about your story and how you came to develop this leadership coherence thing. So I always start by asking my guest to tell their own story, because you can tell it far better than anybody else. It's yours. So please share it, some of it at least, with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to jump right into it, I have been in the healthcare space, promoted into the technology space, and there was a shift. It was a hard transition. I started out as a pharmacy technician, and through over 17 years, have now moved into software implementation through to project management. And one thing that I found constant going through those changes is there was a technical requirement from me in order to excel, and I could not do it without my faith. I found myself relying on those skills that were not taught in the classroom. And what was even more interesting is there was no one in my setting at that time that would mentor or could mentor me through these different changes. What was more interesting is I found out I was experiencing what I would later come to develop a solution for.
That it's interesting because there that often happens to us. That the experiences we have, especially the rough spots, the painful parts of life, become or have the potential to become a tool for us to move forward in a wonderful and stronger way in serving other people, understanding problems, finding solutions, whatever it may be. But
Absolutely.
those hard spots can be good teachers.
Those hard spots can be good teachers, and it's necessary to pull out of us really what we're purposed to do. A lot of times when we meet opposition or resistance, especially in the workplace or in new environments, we tend to back up and we say,
Mhm.
maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not skilled enough. Maybe I shouldn't be in this role. Maybe this room is not for me. I've come to understand and truly believe that is really the moment that we should press into, right? Whatever we
Mhm.
notice, that just may be our assignment.
It can be, and it can show us that we have some skills and qualities that we're not even aware of, or that we can develop them to meet that time. So those two kinds of things. What is leadership coherence?
So that's a good question. And just simply put for the audience, leadership coherence is the hidden gap between what your mind knows and what your nervous system is actually running on. And what's very unique about that gap is I don't know if it can be taught, Kathleen. I think as women of faith and as professionals, as those that are purpose driven, it's something that we already have the language that we've already experienced, or we may have the language for. We just may need to lean into it. So it could be something as simple as, and I think a really good example of it is before we move into the higher level rooms, before we get the title, the truth of the matter is we're already a leader. We're already
Mhm.
equipped. We already have the skills. We already have those innate abilities. We really just need the opportunity to present itself. We just really need the room, the door to open itself, and we step into it. So that
Mhm.
gap between when we develop those skills and really getting the opportunity, there is a cognitive mismatch there that happened. There's a shift there that happens. That is what I call leadership coherence. When your mind knows one thing, but your nervous system or maybe your environment has not necessarily agreed with it just yet.
For many people who don't really understand the relationship between mind and nervous system, can you explain that a little bit more? Because I mean, there's a lot of that coming out these days, but it's not quite universal language these days yet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I'm doing my best not to make it so clinical, right? Not to make it
Hmm.
so technical. And I think the best way to explain it is maybe through an example.
Yeah.
I had a specific experience where I was under pressure. I was in a tight spot where I needed to make a detrimental decision
Mm.
about a dire situation. I assessed the situation. I knew what I was dealing with. My mind had come to a conclusion of what I needed to do, how I needed to move through this situation. I was settled in my mind, but in myself, my physical self was still very unsettled. I could not really get the two to agree. And you may experience that through nervousness, through anxiousness, through racing thoughts, through sweating, through anxiety. There are different ways that your physical body can produce these results. The coherence is when you can come to agreement in both your mind, your body. I'll even include the spirit because I believe that's an innate tool that we use to make decisions. So when you get the whole of who you are to settle on a matter and you're able to move forward into decision, good decision, solid decision making, I call that coherent.
Okay, let me see if I can phrase this so I make sure I'm understanding you. We can come to a decision like you talked about in our mind, but there's that little bit of, you call it anxiety, the nervousness. We're not yet at peace with that decision. And that shows up then in ways like the anxiety, sleeplessness, being short with other people, any of those kinds of things. And the stress level is, way up here. And so we're not, you said settled, I might use the word at peace with what's
Absolutely.
going on in our bodies and being able to face what's going on. So does that say the same basic thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was
Okay.
another good example of it. Not being at peace. I think
Hmm.
that that's a holistic way to explain it, and we all understand that. So the coherence is when all of that comes together, when our
Hmm.
mind agrees, when we are at peace with it, when we're settled with it, and we can move forward and make solid decisions. So yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so you say that women of faith already have a kind of a language for that. What is that language that you talk about?
Oh man, this is such a good question. And I think it's such a good question because as you ask it, my mind reflects. And this is very interesting, Kathleen. Not only does my mind remember, but my body, when you ask that question, my body actually had a positive a response to
Hmm.
that language, right? I became very
Hmm.
light, very just very light, just very inspired. But to answer the question, yeah, that innate skill is pretty much exactly what I described, right? You're not really meeting internal resistance is how I would say we women of faith already have that language. And how we get it is through stillness,
Hmm.
really quieting yourself through meditation. There are different levels of meditation that can bring
Hmm.
clarity. Another tool that I really focus on through the SQ decision system is fasting. We hear a lot about attention deficit. We hear a lot about racing thoughts. We hear a lot about focus issues. There are so many medications, so many drugs now that attend to that issue. But
Hmm.
fasting, yeah, fasting is one of those ways that we gain peace and that we gain clarity, that we gain focus. And the thing that I love about these different innate skills is there is no qualifier. You don't need a degree for it. You don't need to live in a certain area for it. You don't have to be in a certain age group. You don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to have a six pack of abs to to to
Good.
use good. You
Yeah.
don't need to be able to gain these advantages.
The language you're talking about are some of these tools of faith
That's it.
that are part of many different faiths, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, any faith. Uh, every faith that I know of that's kind of an organized religion talks about some degrees of stillness, prayer, meditation, fasting. Some of them are ritualized at certain times of the year. Some of them we can do anytime.
That's it.
Yeah. And yet, I think they're not necessarily seen as tools to be used in business. Yes, yoga. Yes, some of them, not really meditation necessarily, but yes, yoga would be sometimes meditation. Uh, Another one that I would include is gratitude
Oh
as a
wow.
tool for any of this. And some of that is being used in business these days. So, how would someone begin to incorporate these tools, this language, into their decision-making process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me first say I love that you pointed out because that was one of the defining factors that as I built out the SQ decision methodology, I made it a point to be clear that religion was not a definer of where these
Mhm.
practices started, who originated them, who was the maker of it, all the things that distract people and really kind of get them away from the benefits. Nothing to do with religion. We're just talking about principles and practices that
Mm.
absolutely improve outcomes, right? So SQ or spiritual intelligence does not exclude anyone, it actually includes us all. But how people can use these tools is first and foremost, and I think that this part is really, really important. We have to train them. While discernment, while fasting, while meditation, while gratitude, while all of those things do not have requirements as to who can use them, but what I will say is you have to train them, right? Discernment is trainable, right? It's not a mood, it's not a personality type, but it absolutely does have a measurement to it. And I think that that is the best way to start off is to actually train these tools. And we kind of get into that more and more, but it is all about stillness. We can even fast from social media. We can even fast from humans. Just kind of stealing away. We kind of, I'm sure we kind of know about that. Even stealing away, quieting the noise. And a tagline of the SQ program is elite leaders train their spirit or train their internal capacity the same way athletes train their body. And that is absolutely a full stop statement. The best way to get into using these tools, you have to train them.
And that's interesting because yeah, I grew up. I'm a pastor. I grew up in a faith community, and we talk about a lot of these tools. Don't talk about breath work as much, although that's becoming a little more common. And haven't talked about meditation as much, but prayer, yes. And some faith groups talk about fasting much more than others traditionally do. But yet, I find that so many people don't understand what these tools are or how to use them. And I hear that's what you're saying, for one. And there's a lot of popular ways out there to use some of these tools, different kinds of fasts, different durations of them, if it's food type of fasting. But I like what you said, we can fast from social media, we can fast from the news, we can fast from all kinds of different things. So, but how long for a period of time do you fast? And I think part of that is figuring out how it works for each person. Is that accurate? Because if you're going to fast, I know someone who once a week does like a 24-hour food fast. It's just water. I try to fast at least 14 hours between the end of my meal on one day and breaking that fast for my breakfast the next morning. And sometimes it's longer than 14 hours. But to find what does that mean for a person? Is that what you mean by training someone?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good parallel is an athlete, right? All athletes, we have or humans, we have different body types. We have different cognitive patterns. One thing that the Clarity Protocol tool does is it helps to define your peak performance period, your peak performance time of day. It's different for everyone, right? The other really important thing, Kathleen, is one thing I've learned about faith is it is very practical. A lot of people
Yeah.
think, and I did think early on in my walk, I thought it was just all mystical and you could wave it all away or you could, just wish it all away. But training your faith tools, training your discernment, training your gratitude, training your fasting pattern. Those are all very practical practices and we should do them with wisdom. They are different for everyone. So I think it kind of starts at how you is defining one, what is your goal. We still do not dismiss what makes sense. We still do not dismiss medical advice. We still do not
Uh,
dismiss wisdom. We still do not dismiss, these things that we should consider with our overall health. But, going back to just everything about faith is very practical. So we use that those exact same practices as we move through clarity, developing clarity and different things. We don't dismiss what absolutely makes sense for the body. Just like an athlete would not. You won't set out and do a marathon without water. So we train those things. And if I could just add a little caveat real quick, what was really, really interesting as I got into leadership and just positions with more responsibility early on, I think I struggled because there was not a balance between the faith and maybe the technical skill, right? So I'm being promoted, I'm in these new roles, I'm in these new positions, and as I met resistance or opposition, I wanted to just pray it away. I wanted to I wanted to just pray it away when the truth of the matter is there was also some technical skills, some professional skills that I needed to develop more. Same thing with this protocol, our cognitive training, our spiritual training, the science behind it, they all go together.
And like you said, you're not dismissing medical care, or if somebody needs therapy of some sort, whether it's physical or some other kind of therapy, it, those things have to be included in the mix of this and not ignored or prayed away type of thing either. That's not a good thing to do. Even when we talk about mindset, and there's a lot of talk these days about mindset and just getting your mind focused in more helpful ways, which is part of what goes along with what you're saying there. You can't just think life, if you got heart problems, you can't just think it away. You need the medical care as well. Be wise about all of that. Why is promotion the most vulnerable moment in a leader's life? Promotion or a major job shift of some sort?
Yeah, and I think it's funny that we're having this question, but I think we kind of just both touched on it. I think that is the period where one, we're shifting into a different cognitive space, and there may be some resistance. We can be a little bit more vulnerable. Why? Because we may be a little bit more anxious. Now fear has showed up because we're operating in a different space and at a different capacity. New players usually come on the scene. We're now, usually we stay in a certain role, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years. So we've become very comfortable on this plane, right? So then when promotion happens, we have to dust off those tools. We have to dust off maybe some of those feelings that we haven't experienced in a while. And we have to go back and retrain. Now we have to pull that fear back in. That's now, and for me, it really did rear its ugly head when I got into new spaces, into rooms with bigger titles and bigger responsibility. That was really a time where instead of rising to the occasion, I'll be honest, Kathleen, my first instinct was to shrink back. My first instinct was to doubt myself, and doubt several other things around me, including, my faith. Can I do this? Am I equipped? Am I supposed to be here? So that is a really vulnerable time for leaders as we step into larger roles. We now have to revisit. Now we have to train a little harder. Things that we've worked hard in the last season to manage and to overcome and to develop. It now requires a different part of us.
Yeah, it does. You're right that for most people, I think the tendency is to shrink, to at least feel smaller, play smaller for a time until we get comfortable, perhaps. And that can be the opposite of what we really need to do at
Hmm.
that point in time.
Hmm.
And so you talk about five distortions in these vulnerable times that pull, especially women, off center. What are those?
Yeah, absolutely. Kathleen, you tell me, do you think women or men experience the same, woes or the same fears that we do?
I think there are men who do feel those things.
Okay.
Yes, very definitely. But I think culturally, many males are kind of just taught to forge ahead. At least in my generation. I don't know about today as well, but that men were mostly taught to just, I'm going in there and I'm gonna take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and do it. That's what I've seen most. But I know other men that have felt, when they're honest, they have expressed some of those same self doubts. So
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. And I think it's just even more acceptable maybe for men to just kind of,
today,
yeah, today. Absolutely. Absolutely.
hmm
So those distortions and most of the do make us very vulnerable during that time of especially promotion. One is urgency, the need to know everything right then in every situation. You have to make a decision on the spot. You have to be Johnny on the spot. And if you don't, you're now less capable, you're less able. So urgency is one. Approval is number two. We want to, even in promotion, we want to be accepted. And what was difficult for me is to be accepted and to feel approved by peers, my
uh,
peer group, whether it was my social group outside of work. I remember my second promotion. I was promoted 3 times in 3 years. On my second promotion, I didn't even want to share with some family and some friends. There was a sense of remorse, because I knew that there were others around me that maybe were not excelling as quickly. And maybe we started off in the same space or in the same arena, and now I'm in a different place. So approval was one. Fear is three. We talked about fear. We know fear distorts. It rears its ugly head. It changes your perception of who you are. It changes your
hmm
perception of the situation and your capacity in that situation.
right.
Exhaustion is number four. Yeah, we all can understand exhaustion as we
hmm
promote and go into new roles. There's a need or there's a push to do more, to overcompensate so that you can convince people,
hmm
even though you're in this
Yeah.
role, you want to convince people or you want to seal the deal even though you're in this new position. You have to hammer it in and let people know I am qualified, I can do this job, I am good enough. So you find yourself exhausted because you want to overperform just to make sure that you're accepted and you're seen as belonging. And number five is overload. Overload is kind of the umbrella because when we couple urgency with approval and combine it with fear and exhaustion, you get overload. So
hmm
the good news is that each one we can still resolve. We can still work through, urgency we can regulate it. Approval, it meets discernment. We'll come to really understand that one, we're already approved. You're already a leader
hmm
before you stepped into the role. The role, the opportunity just presented the case for you to show your skills and so on. So once you can name the distortion is what I call those, you can govern.
Yeah, noticing, naming it, recognizing that's what is happening inside yourself and the feelings that are there. And that's where those other tools you talked about are so important, the stillness, because until we can be still and stop, even for 5 minutes
Even
sometimes,
for 5 minutes.
it's really hard to notice what's going on with us. That we're feeling like we have to overperform,
Yes.
that we're exhausted,
Yes.
and feeling overwhelmed by all of this. So, and for women, there's the tendency to be Wonder Woman can do it all, you know, type of thing. And sometimes the expectation from our culture to be that, especially for women who are not not only a wife but a mother. and maybe taking care of older parents on top of all of that, plus doing this leadership role
That's it.
or a professional leadership role. All of those are leadership roles. So to realize that no, there are times we just got to learn to say no
We just got to learn
to
to say
someone.
no. We just got to learn
Yeah.
to say no. We just got to learn to say no. And I think again, that's why training, just training these skills, spiritual intelligence, like you said, it doesn't just operate in corporate. It doesn't just operate in business. Although I'm so glad we are introducing those tools into these different spaces
Hmm.
because boy, when I
Yeah.
tell you there was such a divide, it was almost taboo. And over on the Builders Edit, I just my June issue was I said the F word at work and got called into the office. The F word is faith,
Yeah, not the other F word.
not the other one.
Yeah. The other
No,
F one gets used in business at
that's
times.
it.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. It's to be able to use faith in, I think part of the reason it's a no no to talk about in business so often is because faith has been used all too often as you got to believe my way or else you're not good enough type of thing,
That's it.
and kind of clobbering people over the head with a particular religious view
Yeah,
of something. And that I agree. I don't like, I'd like the open conversation, but to use it kind of as a cudgel to hammer people with, no, or to evangelize through, unless your business is evangelism, that's a different story. But to use your faith in a corporate setting to kind of evangelize other people, no. There is a
absolutely.
place for faith, and it's within how we function and using those tools for ourselves. And then if somebody asks me about it, yeah, I'll share that, but not hopefully in a way that distorts to say that my way is the only way. And that's
That's
why I
it.
like your SQ system, because it's spiritual intelligence, and it's broader than one religion and one
Ab-
way of seeing things.
yeah, absolutely. And I think especially Kathleen, that you're a pastor, I think you can have a special appreciation for what we've learned about religion and what we've learned about faith. They're two completely different
Mm-hmm.
things. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
religion has been used for control, for power, to will, to persuade. And one thing we know about faith is it is the substance of things not seen. And as you said,
Mm-hmm.
we can demonstrate it in the workplace, but does it belong in, do we need tambourines in the break room? I don't think, I don't believe that we do.
Marines in the break room could be nice, but yeah, if it's a nice dance or something like that, uh, but not to, you know,
That's it.
yeah. Why measure the sacred? Why do you measure the sacred?
Because of the outcome. Because of the outcome. Let me tell you, we can't get away from the outcome. And I think more than anything, you can line up a good number of people and can they dispute? I mean, I'm sure it can be. But for the most part, us that know, that have experienced the outcome, when we include our discernment, when we train our gratitude, when we consider our faith, when we're making decisions, those outcomes have been the most prosperous, have been the most beneficial outcomes, not just for myself, but for those around me. And I think that that is the overall arc of what we are here to do. A gift is not for me, right? The measurement is really not for me. Have I benefited from it? I have. But
Hmm.
the measurement is really not for me. It's just the evidence of the impact that these tools have on the larger society. A gift is to be given. And I think that that is why it's so important to measure the sacred.
When you talk about a gift to be given, it reminds me that gifts are like sitting on a what I grew up calling a seesaw, or other people call it teeter totter. You have to first be willing to receive it. And sometimes we have a hard time receiving gifts in this culture. At least some people do have a hard time receiving or acknowledging something as a gift, but then also to be willing to share it. In what Christians call the Old Testament, Abraham and the Jewish people were blessed to be a blessing, not to keep the blessing. And that's the same for those who are Christian and all of the Abrahamic faiths, which includes Islam.
That's it.
Um, we are blessed to be a blessing. And that's what I hear you talking about. And learning to discern the gifts that you have to be used in leadership and each stage and level of that leadership that we are called into in some way, manner, shape, or form, and how to discern those gifts, how to become at peace with them, at least to some extent. I'm
That's
not
it.
sure we're ever totally at peace with all of those gifts,
Yeah,
but
they change.
they change and they call us to struggle at times and to situations that can be hard and difficult. But then to do that in a way that blesses others.
That's it. That is absolutely
Yeah.
it. That's absolutely it. And when I know people will say, "Well, if I have a gift and I'm giving it away, and you say it's not for me, Dawn, and that we should become more discerning and more compassionate and gain clarity for others. Like, what about me? Well, we all are given a measure, so the next person or your neighbor or your sister or your brother, their gift is for you, right? So you won't be left out in the cold. You won't be left ungifted, but our gift is to is to give away. And again, everybody has a measure, and somebody else's gift is to benefit us. And I think that that's the beautiful part about it. Like they said, the gift that just keeps on giving. All of those things, faith, that faith encompasses, and gratitude, and the compassion. It's the
Mhm.
gift that keeps giving.
And as you were talking, it reminded me the idea as we give, we don't become empty. I mean, unless we're doing the overload and overwhelmed, then we become feeling very empty. But when we give out of the gratitude, out of the love, out of the compassion, the kindness, and the awareness of the gift, that doesn't mean we become depleted of that gift. And like you say, other people have gifts that then pour into me.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
So it's a beautiful symphony
Oh yeah,
of coming,
absolutely.
sharing, and giving, or I sometimes liken it to this beautiful banquet. We come and we share the gifts that we bring,
Yes.
and somebody shares the gifts they bring, and together it's a beautiful banquet.
Beautiful. Yes, a beautiful, beautiful banquet. And I think that's the benefit. We're all bringing something, and even sometimes those that come to the banquet empty, it's okay because we have enough to replenish them. We have enough that when
Yeah.
they walk away, they'll walk away with something. And that's also why I believe that the tools, the principles that we use are so important. Why? Because it leads us to a life of wholeness. We'll know the things that we need to really be burdened with. We'll know the things we need to let go of. We'll know the things how to measure. Fear won't take so much from us. We won't be distorted and
Hmm.
disturbed and distracted by fear. So, urgency, we have a better measurement of what's important now, what takes priority now, what should I do now, how slowly should I walk through this day, how deliberately should I walk through this day, and how present. You gave a perfect example. It's all a beautiful symphony.
You have a free gift that's available to people. Please share a little bit about what that is and where people can find that.
Absolutely. And, thank you so much for that. I'm sure you will provide that information for them. But here, I will tell you, it is the SQ decision diagnostic, and what it does is it assists you in finding your distortion pattern. We talked a little bit earlier about being able to identify your peak performance period. My peak performance period is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That absolutely can change, but the tool will help you to measure that. Sometimes people are
Mhm.
holding meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when that is not your performance period. You're much better in the day. So in about 5 minutes, you can answer a short diagnostic and you receive a personal decision distortion pattern. So what it does is it just kind of tells you where pressure bends your thinking, where your clarity is leaking, and it opens the door to more tools and just how to get a better outcome.
Thank
And
you, thank you. And go ahead.
yeah, nope, just gonna give the site. You can find that on the homepage of sq-leadership.com.
Simple enough. sq-leadership.com. And
That's
that
it.
will be hopefully on the screen or at least in the show notes for anybody who needs a reminder of that. And I'm assuming that somewhere on that website they can also get in touch with you
Yes,
if they wish
absolutely.
to do that.
If they wish to do so, I'd love to answer any questions or provide even more clarity or go farther into depth with any of the different levels. But you can also reach me by email at dawn at sq-leadership.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions. You'll find me on LinkedIn as well. Thebuildersedit.com is where you will find my purpose driven digital publication for leaders in faith. And it is for the
Okay.
leader you just became.
Okay. Okay. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, Dawn, for being here
Yes.
and for sharing your gift of who you are and what you're doing with people today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathleen. The Tilted Halo is such a blessing. I really appreciate this opportunity and speaking with you today. It was so lovely.
I've had a great time. I've learned a lot too. I'm sure others who watch and listen will learn some wonderful things, some good things as well. Until next time, folks, come back again. Like this, share it, let people know about this, and come back for another episode.
Yeah.
So, blessings to everyone. You've been listening to The Tilted Halo for women of faith who know we're not perfect, yet boldly lead anyway. If today's episode encouraged you, please like it, share it, and leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss what's next. And for more tools, resources, and encouragement, visit me at KathleenAPanning.com. Until next time, keep leading boldly with faith, gratitude, and God's grace.